Montana Territory, July 1874. Dust swirled off the hooves of a lone rider cutting across the prairie, the sun beating low behind him, turning the sky to fire. At the edge of a dry creek, a woman crouched beside a buckled wagon wheel, sweat streaking her brow, hands raw from hours of failed effort. Her dress was torn at the hem, her face set hard. "I told you," she muttered under her breath. "I do not believe in love." From his saddle, the cowboy pulled his hat off and called down, "Then let me teach you what it feels like." She froze at his voice. He was tall, with a sun-browned face and a steady kind of quiet in his eyes. His name was Silas Granger, and he had been trailing the old stage road from Fort Benton to Helena when he spotted the ruined wagon. The woman straightened slowly, not startled, just tired. "Unless you can fix this wheel or turn back time, I don't see what teaching me anything will do." "Lucky for you," he said, climbing down. "I'm better with my hands than with words." Her name was Delaney Foster. 23, widow. No ring on her finger anymore, just a pale band where it used to be. She had 2 children curled up in the shade beneath the wagon, Lydia, 6, and Leo, 4. Both slept, too hungry and too weary to stay awake. Silas crouched to inspect the broken wheel. "You alone out here?" Delaney wiped her hands on her skirt. "The man who promised to take us to Helena left us 2 days ago, said he was going for water, never came back. You his wife?" "No," he looked up. "You trust strangers easy, not anymore." Silas nodded once and stood. Wheels cracked through. "You will not make it far like this." "I figured." He walked to his horse, pulled out a small canvas roll of tools, and returned. "I can get you moving. There's a ranch about half a day's ride west, belongs to a friend. You can rest there." Delaney watched him work, cautious but desperate. Her children needed food, shelter, and she had nowhere else to go. She broke the silence after a while. "Why help us?" Silas did not look up. "Because someone helped me once." He spent an hour fixing the wheel, reinforcing the spokes with spare timber from the wagon's underside. When he was done, he wiped sweat from his brow and offered her a hand. "Let's go." They rode slow, Delaney on the wagon bench, Silas beside her on horseback. Her children stirred awake as the sun dipped low. Lydia climbed into her mother's lap, whispering, "Mama, is he gonna leave too?" Delaney tightened her arms around her daughter. "No, baby, not yet." Silas kept his pace steady beside them, eyes scanning the horizon. He did not speak much, but his presence was calm, sure. Delaney glanced at him once, catching the way he looked back at her children, not with pity but with something steadier, like respect. By dusk, the ranch came into view, 3 low buildings nestled against the hills, smoke curling from a chimney. A woman waved from the porch as they approached. "Silas," she called. "You bring home strays again." "Just one," he said. "And her kids." The woman's name was Mabel. She took one look at Delaney's face and ushered her inside without question. Baths were drawn, soup reheated, blankets aired out. Later, after the children had eaten and slept in a borrowed bed, Delaney stood on the porch, arms crossed tight. Silas joined her, handing her a tin cup of coffee. "You are safe here." "I do not believe in love," she said again. "Not after what I have seen, not after what I have survived." Silas leaned on the railing beside her. "You do not have to believe in it, just feel it." She turned toward him. "That easy, huh?" "No," he said, voice quiet. "Not easy. But real, and worth it." Delaney stared out at the night. Crickets hummed in the grass. Inside the house, her children slept soundly for the first time in days. She did not know what came next, but she knew for the first time in years she was not alone. Silas did not touch her. He did not ask for anything. Just stood beside her like he would stay there as long as she needed him to. And for the first time in a long time, she did not want to run. Morning came with the hush of dew settling into the tall grass, and the lowing of cattle beyond the barns. Delaney stood barefoot on the porch of the bunkhouse Mabel had set aside for her and the children, her hands wrapped around the warmth of a tin mug. The air smelled of damp earth and horses, and for the first time in weeks, her body didn't ache from sleeping on packed dirt. She was watching a bay colt chase its shadow in a corral when Silas came up from the barn slope, sleeves rolled to his elbows, shirt damp at the collar. He paused at the bottom of the steps, brushing hay from his trousers. "You sleep," she nodded once. "Well enough. You eat." "I will." He started to climb the steps, then thought better of it and leaned against the post instead. "There's a man in town sells spare bolts and wheels. I can ride in, see if he's got something better suited for that wagon of yours." Delaney looked past him to where Lydia was helping Mabel collect eggs. Leo sat in the dirt, tracing patterns with a stick. "I don't have money," Silas shrugged. "I didn't ask for any." She narrowed her eyes. "I don't like owing." "Then call it a favor between neighbors. We're not neighbors, not yet." Delaney looked down at her feet, toes curled on the cool wood. "Why do you keep offering things I haven't earned?" He met her gaze. "Because you're not asking for them." She didn't reply, but her jaw shifted slightly, like she was holding back something sharp. He didn't press. Instead, he tipped his hat and turned toward the corral. "I'll be back by supper." "Silas," she called after him. He stopped, not turning around. "I don't know what you want from me." His voice came steady. "Not everything given comes with a hook." Her hands tightened around the mug as he disappeared down the trail. That afternoon, while the children napped on a pallet of quilts, Mabel handed Delaney a rusted tin box. Inside were sewing needles, thread, and a pile of torn linen. "Thought your hands might be restless." Delaney hesitated, then took up a square with a ripped seam. "You always keep spare work for strangers." "I keep spare work for women who look like they need something to keep their minds from running off." Delaney ran her fingers over the fabric. "I wasn't planning to stay. Didn't figure you were." "That doesn't mean you can't catch your breath while you're here." The two women sat in the shade, mending without words for a while. Later, when the children woke, Delaney watched them eat honey biscuits without rushing, crumbs soft in the corners of their mouths. She didn't realize she was crying until Mabel pressed a clean rag into her hands. "I buried my husband in Kansas," Delaney said quietly. "He died coughing blood in the winter. We waited for spring to move on. I thought maybe Helena would be better. It wasn't." Mabel didn't ask questions. She just sat beside her and stitched. By the time Silas returned, the sun had dropped behind the cottonwoods. He brought back a new wheel rim and a sack of dried apples. He said nothing as he passed them over, just nodded and went to the barn. After the evening meal, Delaney found him oiling tack near the stalls. "You didn't have to buy fruit. You didn't have to mend Mabel's linens." She leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You always this generous with strangers." He didn't look up. "You're not a stranger anymore." Delaney watched him thread the leather through the buckle. His movements were slow, practiced. There was a quiet in him that didn't press, didn't demand. It just filled the space like water in a dry creek. "I don't know how to trust a man who doesn't want something." Silas stood, wiped his hands on a rag. "Then I'll wait until you do." He walked past her into the night, and she stayed there a long time, listening to the wind shift through the grass, wondering what it would take to stop running. The wind shifted toward the north the next morning, carrying with it the thin scent of rain and something older, damp sagebrush crushed beneath hooves, the promise of a storm not far off. Delaney stood behind the barn, sleeves rolled up, splitting kindling into neat stacks. She hadn't asked to help. Mabel had taken the children into the main house to teach them how to braid corn husks, and Delaney had needed something that used her hands, something that didn't ask for words. Silas approached from the field, a coil of rope slung over one shoulder, his boots damp to the ankles. He didn't speak at first, only watched her movements, the sharp rhythm of the hatchet biting into wood. When he stepped closer, it was slow, deliberate, as though not to spook her. "You ever break a horse?" he asked. Her grip paused at the question. "No." He set the rope down and leaned on the fence rail. "I've got a gelding that won't take a saddle without a fight, mean as a kicked wasp nest. Thought I'd try something different today." "What's that got to do with me?" Thought maybe he'd listen better to someone who doesn't expect him to obey. She rested the hatchet on a stump. "You want me to train your horse. I want you to meet him. That's all." Delaney studied his face, trying to find the catch. There wasn't one. Just the same steady quiet he always wore, like he didn't need to fill the space between them to prove anything. She followed him across the pasture to a small corral near the edge of the tree line. The gelding stood inside, ears pinned, flanks twitching. A long scar traced down his left shoulder, pale against the chestnut hide. "He's been tossed around," Silas said. "Came from a freight outfit down near Bannack. They ran him near to death. I bought him for $5 and a sack of oats." Delaney didn't enter the pen. She crouched near the fence, eyes level with the gelding's. "What's his name?" "Haven't given him one yet." She rested her arms on the top rail. "He doesn't like people." "Neither did I for a time." She glanced at him. "What changed?" The right hand offering something without taking. The gelding snorted and turned away, his tail flicking. Delaney waited, then stepped down into the dirt, slow and even. She didn't reach for the rope Silas offered. Instead, she crouched again, this time inside the corral, and sat in the dust. Silas didn't say anything. He leaned against the gate and watched. The gelding circled twice before stopping a few feet away. Delaney didn't move. The sun climbed higher, dragging shadows across the grass. After several long minutes, the gelding took a cautious step forward. "You always this patient?" Silas asked. "Only when I don't want to get kicked." He smiled, not wide, but enough to crease the corner of his mouth. "He might let you touch him yet. Let's not rush it." Hours passed. The gelding inched closer by degrees until his breath stirred the loose hairs near her cheek. Delaney didn't lift her hand. She just sat, letting him decide. By dusk, he nudged her shoulder once, then walked away. Silas opened the gate and held it for her. "That's more than I've ever gotten from him." "He's not ready," she said. "Neither are you." She stopped just outside the fence. "I didn't ask to be, I know." They walked back to the house in silence, the sky darkening behind them. Thunder rolled far off, low and steady. Inside, Mabel had lit the lamps and set out supper. The children crowded around the table, cheeks flushed from play. Delaney served them first, then sat at the far end, her shoulders drawn tight. Silas didn't sit beside her. He took the stool nearest the stove, far enough to give her space, close enough she could feel his presence. After the children had gone to bed, Delaney stepped out onto the porch. Silas followed, 2 mugs in hand. Didn't feel right sitting inside. She took the coffee but didn't drink. "You always wait for people to come to you. Only the ones who need time." She turned toward him, the lamplight behind her outlining the slope of her jaw. "You think I'm like that horse?" "I think he's not the only one trying to learn how to trust again." Neither spoke for a long time. The wind picked up, carrying the first faint patter of rain across the roof. Delaney glanced toward the barn. "He'll need shelter tonight. I already brought him in." She nodded, then looked down at the mug in her hands. "I don't know what this is." "You don't have to name it yet." She met his eyes. "You really mean to wait?" Silas's voice came low. "As long as it takes." Rain fell steady now, soft against the porch roof. Delaney didn't move away from him. Instead, she stayed beside him until the night settled in full. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, She didn't feel the need to run. The rain passed in the night, leaving behind a sky washed clean and pale with early light. Delaney stood near the paddock fence, her braid damp against her back, watching the clouds break open above the hills. The earth looked softer somehow, less brittle. She hadn't meant to wake this early, but a strange quiet had stirred her from her bed, less like worry, more like waiting. Silas approached from the side pasture, a pitchfork slung carelessly over one shoulder. He didn't speak until he was near enough that she could hear the gravel shift under his boots. "You ever see the Madison River in spring?" She shook her head. "I haven't been west of Helena. There's wild iris along the banks, thick as blue smoke. Might still catch the bloom if we start early tomorrow." Delaney narrowed her eyes slightly. "Are you offering to take me on a trip?" "I'm offering to show you something that doesn't ask anything of you." She turned back toward the field. "You think I need pretty places to forget hard years?" "No," Silas said, setting the pitchfork aside. "I think you need to see something that didn't break when the world turned cruel." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Later that morning, Delaney helped Mabel render lard in the kitchen. The children were outside with a milk cow, crouched in the sun, whispering secrets into the calf's ear. Mabel handed Delaney a tin basin and gestured toward the far table. "Cut that soap block into squares before it sets hard." Delaney worked the knife through the cooling lump, the scent of ash and tallow sharp in the air. Mabel wiped her hands on her apron and leaned one hip against the counter. "I saw how he looks at you," she said. Delaney didn't look up. "You think I haven't been looked at before?" "I think you haven't been looked at like you're a place a man might rest." Delaney kept cutting. "He's not the kind to force his way in," Mabel continued. "But he's the kind to stay if you let him. I'm not looking to be someone's duty." "Then it's a good thing he ain't the kind to carry anyone out of guilt." Delaney finished the last slice and set down the knife. "I don't know how to trust something that doesn't hurt when it leaves." Mabel didn't reply, but her hand came down warm on Delaney's shoulder before she turned back to the stove. That evening, Silas brought a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth and set it on the porch steps where Delaney sat shelling peas. "Found this in a dry goods store south of town," he said. She peeled back the cloth. A worn paperback was inside, its edges frayed, binding cracked. The title was faint but the script delicate. She ran her thumb over the cover. "You said you read by lamplight as a girl," Silas said. "I figured you might miss it." "I didn't say that. You had the kind of eyes that said you used to." She closed the book gently and looked up at him. "You always pay attention to things that aren't said out loud, only when the quiet's saying more than the words." She stood slowly, the oilcloth still in her hands. "Why are you doing this?" Silas took one slow breath, not breaking her gaze. "Because somewhere between fixing your wheel and watching you calm that gelding, I started hoping you'd stay." Delaney's throat tightened. "And if I don't, then I'll still be glad I got to see the way you steady things just by standing near them." She didn't reply, but she didn't return to the peas either. Instead, she walked past him into the house, fingers still curled around the book as though it might vanish if she let go. That night, after the children were asleep and the lamps burned low, Delaney sat at the table and opened the first page. The words swam at first, but then settled. She read until her eyes blurred. When she stepped outside, the stars were out and the air held the faint scent of pine. Silas was sitting on the edge of the porch, one boot propped up, hands folded. "You were right," she said. He turned slightly. "About what?" "About the quiet. It does speak." He didn't answer, just waited. "I used to believe love meant being needed," she said. "Now I think maybe it means being known." His voice was soft. "I see you, Delaney." She walked the few steps toward him and sat beside him on the porch's edge. The night pressed close around them, and still she didn't pull away. "I'm not ready to say yes," she said. "I'm not asking for yes," he said. "Just don't say goodbye." She looked at him fully then, her eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "I won't." They left before first light, the wagon creaking softly over damp earth as the sky paled to a dull pewter. Mabel packed a satchel of oat cakes and dried venison, pressed it into Delaney's hands without a word, and hugged Lydia and Leo in turn. The children would stay behind for 2 days, tucked into the rhythm of ranch chores and Mabel's steady care. Delaney hesitated before climbing up, scanning the sky as though weighing the cost of absence. But the children waved her off with sleepy grins and sticky fingers, and that steadied her. Silas led them west, following narrower trails than the ones near the homestead paths that curled alongside rock outcrops and crossed shallow streams still cold with meltwater. They passed no one. The quiet here was different than the kind that hung over sorrow. It was wide, full, open enough to breathe in without flinching. Midday found them near a bend in the river. The banks rose in gentle shelves, scattered with smooth stones and wind-blown reeds. Silas tied off the horses beneath a cottonwood and set out a blanket. Delaney took her boots off and stepped into the shallows, skirts gathered in one hand, toes curling into silt. "You ever think about staying put?" she asked, glancing back. "Once," Silas said, kneeling beside the saddlebag, "but the place didn't ask me to." "And if it did now," he looked up. "Then I'd stop." She stepped out of the water slowly, sat across from him, and took a piece of venison. The river whispered behind them, a low murmur over stone. "You never talk about your people," she said. "They're gone," he answered plainly. "Father died breaking horses in Texas. Mother passed the year I turned 17. No siblings, no land. I drifted for a while, took work where I could, nothing held. Until now. I didn't know I was waiting for something that felt like belonging." Delaney softened her shoulders. "I used to think love was about proving yourself. And now," she picked at a seam in the blanket, "now I think it's about being known without having to explain." They camped near the river that night, a small fire tucked against a curve of rock. Silas laid his bedroll a few feet from hers and stayed quiet while she settled in. The wind tugged at the hem of her coat, and the stars blinked low and bright. "I used to be ashamed," she said suddenly, voice low. "Not just of losing him, but of not grieving the way people expected. I was tired, more than I was sad, and I hated that." Silas didn't move. "You don't owe anyone a shape for your sorrow." She turned her head toward him. "You think I'm done being broken?" "No," he said. "I think you're learning how to carry what's cracked without looking for ways to hide it." Delaney reached toward his hand, not for comfort, but for connection. He met her halfway, palm to palm. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded, just the steady warmth of being held without question. In the morning, they followed the river north, where the land opened wider and the iris began to appear first in scattered clusters, then in thick wild drifts that brushed their knees as they walked. Delaney knelt and pressed her fingers to one bloom, the blue so rich it looked unnatural against the soil. "I never imagined anything could grow this wild," she said. Silas crouched beside her. "You're looking at a thing that comes back every spring without being asked." They returned to the ranch the next evening. The sun dipped low behind them, and the children rushed out from the barn with straw in their hair and dust on their cheeks. Delaney caught them both, her arms full, her throat tight. Mabel gave her a knowing nod, but said nothing. That night, after the children were asleep, Delaney stepped out to the porch where Silas was fixing the latch on the screen door. "I'm not going to Helena," she said. "Not anymore." He set the hammer down and turned toward her. "I want to stay," she added, "but not just at the ranch, I mean with you." His mouth parted slightly, then closed again. "That what you're sure of?" She stepped closer. "I'm sure I don't want to spend another year wondering what it would feel like to live beside someone who sees me clear." Silas reached for her hand, held it between both of his like it was something precious. "Then let's build something that doesn't have to be spoken to be understood." She nodded once, and that was enough. They married in September, beneath the cottonwoods near the river bend. Mabel made a dress from homespun blue, and Lydia carried wild iris in a basket she'd woven herself. Leo dropped stones into the shallows during the ceremony, laughing under his breath, and Silas only smiled. They settled in a small cabin a mile from the main ranch house, close enough for the children to run ahead to Mabel's kitchen, far enough to feel like their own start. Silas built a corral for the gelding, the one Delaney had gentled by patience alone, and in time he took to the saddle without fight. The children grew strong, brown from sun and lean from work, and began to call Silas Pa without being asked. There was no grand declaration, no sudden change. Only the slow unfolding of a life that fit. Mornings with fresh bread and warm milk. Evenings with Delaney's head on Silas's shoulder as the lamplight flickered low. They built fences, planted rows of beans and potatoes, taught the children how to mend and ride and listened to wind for signs of weather. Delaney never again said she didn't believe in love. She didn't have to. She lived it, and it stayed.